Hello, friends, and welcome to Unseen But Believed, the podcast, where we talk about all things invisible illness. I'm your host, Anna Constantopoulos, and I've been chronically ill for over 8 years. Today, we will be talking about how to manage school with an invisible illness. Now, this is something you all have asked me a lot since I've started Unseen But Believed, and I've tried to address it a little bit in, my TikToks or articles, and I'm so excited to finally dive deeper into it in this podcast episode. So a little bit of background, I, was healthy all up until high school. I was still able to graduate high school, but I really started facing challenges with my health and my invisible illnesses when it came to college. So I started dual enrolling in college classes in high school at my local community college. And that was very helpful because it kind of got me used to the flow of college and the way they structured things. So when I first went to, real college my freshman year, I went to a school about an hour and a half from my parents in Florida, and I was living on campus, and the first 2 weeks were rough. I'm just going to be brutally honest. About 2 weeks in, I think I called my mom, and I was just crying, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I was like, I am literally hurting so bad every day that I couldn't climb into my bed, which was the top bunk, and I had to ask my roommate to switch bunks with me because I was just so fatigued and exhausted. And I was talking to her, I was like, if I can't even manage, the first 2 weeks, syllabus week, how on earth am I going to be able to manage, 4 years of college? And she talked to me and she was like, look, you feel like God has called you here and you believe that he's going to give you the strength to do it. So I think you need to push through. And I'm so glad she said that to me because it encouraged me to stay and fight through college. And now I am, I graduated college. I graduated magna cum laude with honors. I was doing a bunch of extracurriculars, and now I'm getting my master's degree. And so all that to say, that's not bragging on me at all, but all of that is to say that just because you have an invisible illness or multiple invisible illnesses, it does not mean that you cannot go to school. It does not mean that you can't be successful in school. I'm not saying that's a path for everyone. Not everyone wants to go to school, and that is more than okay. I think that's admirable in a lot of ways. But for me, I was tempted to give up, even though I knew that I was supposed to be in college, that was my career and my calling. I was tempted to give up because of my illness. So I'm making this today to say that doesn't have to be the case. And I'm hoping that I can be the person for you that can say, hey, you can get through this. We'll find ways to manage it together, and you will be successful in school. So this episode is going to be talking a little bit about my challenges that I faced and how I learned to manage them and how a lot of different people helped me manage them. I would say the biggest issue that you're going to face in college is ableism. I don't really like using the term ableism because I think it often has the connotation that people are intentionally being ableist towards you. They're intentionally discriminating against you because you have an invisible illness. And that was not my experience at all. Most of the times when people did something that made it harder for me to function as a student with an invisible illness, it was because they either weren't aware of my situation or they weren't aware of how to handle the situation. And then once I had a conversation with them, they were more than supportive, more than helpful. So I'll just say that pretty much all of my professors in undergrad were extremely understanding of my circumstance and were very willing to work with me and to provide necessary accommodations. So even though there was some ableism I did experience, please don't go into college with the mindset that everyone is out to get you or that everyone is trying to make school harder for you, because that's just not the case for most people. I would say not even 1% of people are going to be intentionally ableist against you. So that would be the first thing, is just don't have that kind of mindset because it's just going to make everything so much harder for you. Now, the most important thing I would say is in preparing for the eventuality that somebody does something against your illness and is discriminating against you in some way, the best way to protect yourself is to register with the disability office. So you can find their information on the school website, set an appointment with them before classes even start. Go to them and be like, hey, these are the diagnoses I have. These are accommodations I need. And if something happens, can I please come to you guys for support? just start developing a relationship with them. If you don't even know what kind of illness you have yet, if you don't even know what kind of accommodations you need, just going to them and saying, I'm probably going to need something from you at some point, please help me. They will be more than helpful and more than understanding, because that's their job. Their job is to protect students with disabilities, and they're on your side. And that way, if at any point in the future a professor is not responding well to you, if they're not helping you succeed in their class, they're the people you go to talk to who will help you in that. So for example, one of the semesters, I was still very, very sick. It was my freshman year, and I was still struggling adjusting to college. And I ended up in the hospital, I think 3 or 4 times that semester, which is quite a lot. And it was just very difficult. And of course, my parents lived like an hour and a half away, and so I'd have to drive like an hour and a half to be with them, and it was just a whole mess. And so I ended up missing a lot of classes. And one of my professors had a very strict attendance policy, so much so that he said he would drop you a full letter grade every class you missed after like the first 3 classes or something. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to email him every time I go to the hospital to let him know, hey, I'm not just skipping class, I'm in the hospital. And so I did that every single time. I was literally be in the hospital bed and emailing this professor to make sure that he wouldn't mark me down for my attendance. And then I get my grade back at the end of the year, and I have a D in the class when I've gotten an A on every single assignment. And that was, I think I cried, because I had worked so hard in that class, even though I was already struggling with all these things to get a good grade. And then just to see it dropped because of that was honestly heartbreaking. And so I think I called my parents crying. I was like, I'm failing college, just having like a massive freak out, former gifted kid problems. And they're like, hey, it's okay. Talk to the disability office about it. Talk to him about it. We'll work it out. This is not going to be the case. You shouldn't be marked down for being in the hospital. And so my parents were kind enough to talk to the disability office for me, because again, I still wasn't feeling well, and my parents are amazing and were supporting me and all of that. And they talked to the professor and made him aware of the situation. And he took away the punishments, the lower grades from missing class or for being in the hospital. And so my grade was brought back up to what it should be. And that was just a whole mess. And I don't know if I would have gotten out of it if I hadn't previously registered with disability. If I had tried to go to them after I'd gotten a bad grade, they might have been, I don't think they would have been, but just on the off chance that they might have been like, oh, you're just trying to get a better grade in the class. But having already registered with them and saying, hey, I know that I'm chronically ill, I'm dealing with these illnesses, it gave me that level of protection and just honestly saved everyone a bunch of time. They were able to very clearly explain to the professor that, I wasn't just trying to get a better grade. And overall, it helped a lot. Now, one thing that I wish I would have done, and this is something that I learned, several years into college, is how much easier it was to just talk with my professors at the beginning of that semester. I think I would have prevented a lot of heartache if at the beginning of every semester, I just would have scheduled a meeting with my professor or sent them an email saying, hey, I just want to let you know I'm registered with the disability office. These are my accommodations. This is some of the things that might happen. I might miss class a couple of times because, I might be going to the hospital multiple times in a semester. And just giving them kind of a heads up so they know that you care enough about their class, first off. You care enough about their class that you're thinking ahead. You talk to them about, hey, I'm going to try and have all my assignments done, but if something happens, I will make them up as soon as humanly possible. And just setting that kind of standard with your professor, because they do really care about you. They care about you learning the material. So I think for most professors, as long as you show them that you're wanting to learn, that you care about the material, and that you're putting in the effort, even despite your invisible illness, I think that goes a long way. And I think I would have prevented a lot of misunderstandings between me and professors about accommodations if I had done that in the beginning. Now, I started doing that my junior and senior year, and all of my professors were absolutely understanding. Not a single one of them were like, no, you can't have these accommodations. Like, they were all absolutely amazing. But I do know of other students who have had that issue. But because they're registered with the disability office, they've been able to negate those. So again, that's why I say to register with disability first, and then talk with your professors, be understanding, because they may have never had to give accommodations to a student before. Most people aren't familiar with chronic illnesses or invisible illnesses. So give them that chance. Give them that chance to understand where you're coming from and what you're dealing with. And 9 times out of 10, probably more, they'll be understanding and they'll help you as much as they can. So that's the easiest way to deal with any kind of ableism you might encounter. But honestly, what the biggest obstacle for me was balancing all of my responsibilities. Like I said before, there's a period in like my first 2 years of college, which were extremely rough. I was struggling to balance all of my different assignments, and later on, balancing assignments and work and, volunteering at church and helping my parents with their ministry. And it was hard to do because I knew I did not have enough energy. I did not have enough spoons to do everything that I thought I had to do in order to be a successful student. And so what ended up happening is I had to face this choice. I had to decide, okay, either I'm going to try and do everything perfectly all the time and have a full mental breakdown and collapse and not be able to do any of it and end up in the hospital because I've pushed myself too far, or I can change the standards that I've set for myself. Now, this is something that's very hard to do, especially if you haven't always been chronically ill. If that's something that popped up later in life and, before you were a high achieving student who could do everything and you never had to set limits, that's awesome. But sometimes when you become chronically ill after that, you still have the same standard for yourself. You still have the same standard that you can accomplish everything at 100% all the time. And that's just not realistic if you have a chronic illness most of the time. Some people are still able to do that. I was not one of those people. After I think like 3 semesters of college, I ended up having to take a semester off to receive some medical treatments. And that was just honestly heartbreaking for me because I felt like a failure. I thought I had to graduate, not just in 4 years, I wanted to graduate in 3 years, which looking back now is absolutely insane. But I thought I had to graduate in a certain amount of time. And because I had to take a semester off for medically necessary treatments, I was failing. And that is just not a good standard to have for yourself. And so I think the number one thing for balancing your responsibilities for school is to change your standard of what's most important. Don't think about trying to accomplish everything all the time at 100%. Think about accomplishing what is the most important. So a habit that I've integrated just in my day-to-day life is I constantly have a to-do list. I love making lists. But on that list, I will put a star by the 3 things that I have to have done that day. Just whatever they might be. It might be an assignment, it might be studying, it might be something with work, it might be filming a podcast. But I'm just like, okay, that's my baseline. If I get those 3 things done, then everything else is bonus. And that has helped me so much because it's helped me realize that, okay, even though I haven't gotten everything done, I've gotten the most important things done, and I can let myself rest so that way I can do more tomorrow. Because if you don't take the time to rest, this is something that I've had to learn through a lot of experience. Your body will force you to rest. If you don't take the time to rest consistently, your body will eventually just kind of shut down for a while to catch up on all the rest you've missed. And that applies to everyone, not just people with chronic illnesses. But especially if you have an invisible illness, you need to be building rest into your day. And you need to do that by focusing just on getting done what's most important and then giving your body the rest it needs. Because giving your body the rest it needs is more important than getting good grades or getting everything that you want to get done. And so it's really difficult to learn how to balance those different responsibilities that you have. But I think by just focusing on the most important things first and making sure that you're taking care of your body in the process, that will long-term lead you to the results that you want instead of trying to do everything perfectly and then ending up in a 3-month-long flare-up where you can't do anything, because that doesn't help anybody, especially you. The last thing that I think is really important to talk about when talking about school is mental health. And again, all this, I'm not saying any of this as a professional. I'm not a medical professional or mental health professional in any way, but I am just speaking from my experience and what I've learned through being in, graduate school and undergraduate school for like 6 years now or whatever. And so mental health is something that I think, affects most college students at some point because it's just a completely different lifestyle than you've lived before. It's your first time really being responsible for things on your own. It can be a lot of changes very fast. And so that's enough to stress anyone out. But when you have a chronic illness, there's a whole new set of factors that you have to deal with. It's not just the change in your lifestyle, but it's oftentimes a change in symptoms. Your symptoms may get worse for a little bit. And I'll be honest about that. My symptoms were a lot worse my first semester just because I had to walk to class a lot more. I was eating different things. I was doing a lot more homework and stuff like that, so I didn't have as much time to rest. And, I wasn't balancing my responsibilities well, so I was just overdoing it. And so my symptoms were a lot worse the first semester. And that can be really hard to deal with, and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you're failing. It can feel like you're not doing as well as other students. And that's really hard to deal with, but I think it's something that probably all of us with an invisible illness, if not all college students, have dealt with at one point or another. Now, again, I'm not a professional. I can't give you any real advice in this area, but what I can say is that it's okay, and it's honestly to be expected. It's okay to be struggling because you're dealing with, a different set of circumstances than most people deal with. It can feel really alienating. But some of the best things that I did for my mental health, especially early on, was I went to counseling. Normally your schools will offer some form of counseling. My parents' insurance covered counseling, so I was able to do that off campus. But on-campus resources are really great too. Building a good support network, people to depend on. I was very fortunate that my brother was with me the first 2 years of college. And so sometimes I was so sick, he would just bring me food because I didn't have the strength to go to the caf. So having people like that in your life who are able to step up when you're not doing as well is really, really helpful. You have the opportunity to do that with them when you're feeling better. So, it's okay to accept help. It's okay to accept help from, your family or your friends when you're struggling because they want to do that for you. They want to take care of you and help you. And that's okay to accept it sometimes. But overall, it's definitely a process. It's not something that's going to get better overnight. And it's probably something that will flare up, just like your physical symptoms. Your mental symptoms might flare up every now and again too. But it is really important to be mindful of that and to be mindful that you're not alone in that and that there are resources to help with that. So to finish off talking about my journey, I was in school in Florida for 2 years. I had to take a semester off to get some medical treatment in Tennessee, and then I went back for a semester. My family moved to Tennessee, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to live in Florida on my own. I wasn't going to be able to do that while being chronically ill, especially since I was still receiving treatments and I had to fly back to Tennessee like every month. And so prayed about it a lot and ended up transferring to college in Tennessee. And that wasn't something that I wanted to do. Again, it felt like I was failing and I had to take another semester off. Again, this was a girl who wanted to graduate in 3 years and was a bit insane about it. So the fact that I was not only transferring, but had to take 2 semesters off of college was not how I expected this to go at all. And it was very frustrating for me because I felt like I had, again, failed, that I wasn't doing as well as other students, and that maybe if I tried harder, I would have been able to stay at the other school. But eventually I learned that it was where I needed to be. I was able to do the healing that I don't think I would have been able to do otherwise. I ended up falling in love with the school that I transferred to, falling in love with my classes there, and learning how to, manage my symptoms and even put some of my symptoms into remission. Ended up going to a grad school attached to that same university because I fell in love with it so much. And even though it was a lot of up and downs, I did eventually graduate, which I was very excited by. By the end of it, I didn't care that I had not graduated in 3 years. I think it ended up actually being 5 years since I started that I graduated. But I was just happy that I made it that far. Whenever people asked me, they're like, oh, how do you feel about graduating? I was like, honestly, I didn't think I would make it this far. And that was the true, honest answer. So I was very excited to be able to walk across that stage. And grad school has been, I've encountered some new challenges in grad school. So maybe I can do a separate episode on that when I finish my first year. And I might have some updated things to add to this. But overall, focusing on my mental health, balancing my responsibilities, and communicating with things like the disability office and the professors I'm taking classes with has been instrumental in me being able to succeed academically. And again, it's something that I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do. And I'm just very excited that I've been able to do this. And I hope this has been encouraging. I hope this has shown you that even though it can be hard to manage school with an invisible illness, and sometimes it can feel like an overwhelming challenge, it doesn't mean it's impossible. And I will say that it is definitely worth it. I am so happy that I fought through all those different things to be able to graduate. I am so happy that I fought through that fear and that doubt that I wouldn't be able to do it, because it has just been amazing. And I have grown so much as a person because of it. and I feel like I will be able to help other people because of it. And having a purpose behind that, I think, is what motivates you to push through the challenges that you're going to face. So that's what I will leave you with, is today just take some time to think about why you want to go to college, why you think it is important, and how you think you can help people with it. Because if you have that purpose, all of the other challenges seem feasible. They're much easier to fight through when you know what you're fighting for. And I know that's really cheesy, but it's a podcast. I've got to end with something kind of cheesy. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a rating or subscribe for future episodes. It's a small action, but it really does help to spread the word about invisible illnesses. Also, if you want to stay up to date on all things Unseen But Believed, go follow me over on Instagram and TikTok at Unseen But Believed. And remember, just because invisible illnesses are unseen, they should be believed.